Thanks for making some time today. I really
Of
appreciate it.
course, I'm excited. I've been watching from afar and I'm a big fan. I think you do a really good job.
Oh, that means a lot. Thanks. Thanks so much. So I guess we should first explain how we know each other. So we first met at UNDTV 5 when you were at University of Indianapolis before moving on to bigger and better things with CBS 4 and Fox 59, currently a reporter there. I mean, early on, did you always want to do media? Was that always something you wanted to do?
Absolutely. So from the fourth grade on, I've wanted to be a television. Well, I should say I started out wanting to be a meteorologist because I did a science fair project on clouds and I thought it was really cool. And the local meteorologist came and judged it. And I was like, you know what, that's what I want to do. And then the more and more I started watching the news for the weather, I realized I kind of digged the news more than I did the weather. So I started realizing that I wanted to be a TV news reporter. And honestly, I mean, it led all of my decisions from an early age. For example, I went to a private Catholic school growing up. And all my friends were going to go to Roncalli. And I decided that I wanted to go to Franklin Central because Franklin Central had a radio station and a TV station. So I wanted to
Hmm.
do broadcasting. So even in high school, I knew what I was going to do. And then I picked UIndy because it had a great communication and broadcasting program. And so, yeah, I've always been on this track. I thought I'd do it forever. And now I'm realizing maybe not.
And we'll get to that if you want to preview it later on in the show. But I was actually thinking about that because I went to Carmel and they have a radio and TV station. That was such an advantage to be 14, 15 years old and you gain access to a station at all. The fact that it's broadcasting at all is a good thing, but to actually have exposure and to have tapes that early on, that gives you some experience and some advantages moving forward in comparison to your colleagues, I guess, right?
Absolutely. And it's life skills that, even if you don't take it into that career, I just know so many people that grew from those programs in high school in general. I wish more high schools had that.
I know that you did a lot of news, and that's primarily what your focus is now. Outside of news, what was your favorite kind of production, if you had to pick?
Oh, I guess, I did like being a radio air personality. I did do radio in college and I liked,
Uh-huh.
you know, DJing and coming up with clever ways to get in and out of songs. And,
Uh-huh.
I had my own radio show in high school. It was called Keeping It Real with Kayla. And I gave
Oh
advice, kind
wow.
of like Delilah, except I wasn't as smooth talking as she was. And I might have ruined like a lot of high school lives because I was not qualified to give advice.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, married men, because it was a real radio station. I mean, people, even not in high school, were listening. So people would call in and they'd ask for my advice. And I'm like, bro, I'm 16. Like, I don't
Oh,
know about how to make your wife love you again, but flowers, I don't know. Like,
that's
so,
amazing. Did you record any of those calls? Do you have like the
gosh,
tapes?
I bet I have some of them somewhere. I'm sure. But yeah, it was an entertaining time. I had a little box outside the radio station, and people would write their problems, and I would solve them live on air. A lot of it was like, how do I ask Susie to the prom or whatever, and then I'd come up with like a clever way to do it. And no, that was a blast. I really enjoyed doing that in high school and then in college. Just I didn't give advice in college, but I at least got to be an air personality occasionally.
Who did you watch while you were growing up? I mean, being from Indianapolis, like David Letterman was always somebody that I watched, especially like, being able to deliver a monologue, that sort of thing. Did you have anybody that you emulated early on?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of cool because I watched Debbie Knox growing up, and then now
Mm,
I've co-anchored with her. So that was a really big
yeah.
dream come true for me, and I don't even think she realized it because I mean I don't want to be like I grew up watching you because I didn't want to like make her feel weird or anything, but it was a big deal, and I don't know. She's one that I watched a lot, but nationally, I loved Diane Sawyer. I used to have like quotes from her on my desk and my wall and things
Uh-huh.
like that. But yeah, I really liked Debbie Knox and Indy at least, and then got to accomplish the dream of co-anchoring with her a few times. Really, I'd fill in for the weeknight newscasts, and somehow they let me do that.
How long's Debbie been in the business now?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. She used to work at Wish TV. So that was what I grew up
Right.
watching her on. And then she actually retired while we were in college. And I remember, just being heartbroken about that. She came to UND and interviewed the UND president right when he was first starting at UND. And then that was like one of the last interviews she did. And I remember talking to her and being like, I'm going to miss you. And then she ended up kind of coming back on CBS4, and she's still there now. So
Yeah.
yeah, she's had quite the career, and she's honestly just as lovely off air as she is on. So that was always fun for me to meet people that I've been watching my whole life, and then to see how they are in person. It's hilarious to me that people like think of TV news reporters and anchors as famous or whatever because
Hmm.
we don't get paid a lot and we don't. Well, some of them do, but it's just funny to me that people think of them as famous people because it's like, oh, they're just regular old Joes, just like everybody else.
Is there anybody that is different on or off the air? I mean, let's face it, there is like some kind of performance element to this, right?
Everybody has a news voice, and so do I. So
Okay.
we do put on our news voice, and yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
I like to make jokes about that. I actually did a TikTok not too long ago because it was like, in your best news anchor voice, do something like very mundane. And so I was like changing my son's diaper, and I was like, pretending like it was a news report. And so, yeah, I mean, we all have our news voices, but I would say that for the most part, there aren't a lot of divas in this business that I've come across, but I've been pretty fortunate. I've heard stories of other people being divas and being, thinking that there's something else. But honestly, I mean, other than the news voice, I'd say that everybody's pretty genuinely themselves on and off air.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there has to be some kind of performance element there. Was that for me, in my experience doing media, it can get really exhausting doing it, day after day, especially if like the subject matter. I know that when you were in Lafayette, you covered the Delphi murders when those went down. Like, how much of a challenge is being in this business when it comes to your mental health?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just talking about this with some of my coworkers too, because they responded to the FedEx shooting, and
Mm.
I wasn't working that day. But I mean, we're humans, and when we respond to those kinds of things, we're scared, we're hurt, we're holding back tears, we're feeling everything that everybody else is feeling, and then you just you kind of have to swallow it a little bit in the moment, but when you get home, it kind of hits you. And I remember when I was covering the Delphi murders, yeah, it just every interview you do, every time you talk to a grieving parent, I mean, I can tell you a lot of days I'd call my mom after work and just be so grateful for the people I still had in my life. And in a way, I mean, it does take a toll on your mental health, in a negative aspect, but then there's also some aspects of it that make you really appreciative of never having gone through something as tragic as some of these situations. But then it also makes you very paranoid. I mean, I've noticed as a mom, I don't trust anyone,
Mm.
and I think a lot of that was caused by news. I used to cover courts, and some of these horrible court cases of I covered this court case of this baseball coach who used to molest little boys, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, my son's getting to the age where I might, when he gets to that age,
Mm.
that's going to be in my mind, and so I think that toll, even if we don't realize it, is playing a role in our minds all the time, because people tell me all the time, like, you're a little paranoid. Like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
because I work in news and I know what can happen and I report what does happen. And, it's so nice for other people because, it's funny that when I was covering a story during the pandemic and it said something like, take a break from the news for your mental health, just turn off the news. And I was like, I can't. You know, like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no such thing as turning off the news for a news reporter. And I mean, you're immersed in it every day, all day. And that's what's expected of you too. And that's kind of the challenge as well, because you're not supposed to deprogram yourself, you know, on your weekends. You're supposed to come in on Monday morning having known everything that occurred over the weekend
Mm.
and staying up to date with everything. So as a mom, I started to realize, you know, I'm sitting here scrolling through Twitter, you know, trying to keep up, you know, going through all my news apps and everything, keep up with what's going on in the world. And right before my eyes, my son is, you know, doing something new because he's at the age where he's learning new words. He's learning, you know, and when I first started, I mean, sometimes he was, you know, crawling or walking, and you try to keep yourself off your phone. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but this career doesn't really allow for a lot of that. So it's been a really big challenge balancing the two. And I found myself envying people who could go to work and then come home and be done with work.
Mm.
Um, and that's not really realistic for a news reporter, at least a news reporter that wants to be good at their job. You know, I mean, you could do it and not be that great, miss some things, and but who wants to, you know, not excel at what they're doing?
Right. I mean, if you're gonna fully immerse yourself in it, it's gonna be like a on-call job, especially like the FedEx thing. You know, that happened in the middle of the night when everybody's asleep. And plus, for me, like what made me divert away from TV, the physical demands of it. It's not like you're gonna have. I mean, did you have a cameraman with you? Someone to set. I mean, it's all individual
No,
work now, right?
yeah, it's going away from that a lot. I mean, if it's a big story, like let's, you know, say the vice president or somebody's in town, you know, obviously I'm going to get a photographer for that story. But
Right.
my day to day, I mostly always work alone. And yeah, I mean, you got to haul around a camera, a tripod. I mean, I've been called a bag lady. I just I'm hauling all these things around, and especially when I was 8 months, 9 months pregnant, people were like, "What are you doing?" Like,
Yeah.
honey, can I carry that for you? Like, and so, yeah. And I mean, you're doing that. At least I was in West Lafayette. You know, I was, could have had the baby any day now, and I was still hauling around camera equipment and things like that. So,
And
um,
what is a typical? That's like 25 pounds. A
yeah.
tripod and
Yeah, I
the
think
full thing.
technically I probably shouldn't have been doing that.
Right.
Like if I would have talked to my OB about it. But yeah, I mean it can get pretty heavy. And then if you want to bring a light and you want to bring all the other things that might be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
useful for your story, then you're really getting up there. Some people like will get like wagons or whatever and like put it all in that. And but you know, if you're on the
Right.
go, like you're trying to get somewhere quickly, you don't have all that time to like haul that stuff. So you just grab your camera and your tripod and go. But yeah, it can get kind of physically demanding. And but I mean, and then it's also just, I mean, if you went through the list of things that I have to do every day, I mean, I start out, I have to have 3 story pitches in the morning. I have to have them sent before my shift. So a lot of it is you're doing things when you're not even on the clock. So you're looking for story ideas before you even start your day. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing they want are those 3 pitches. You go into your meeting, they tell you which one that you want to pursue, and then your schedule is dependent on everybody else's availability. So, you know, if I don't get and I cover the state house, so a lot of the times the lawmakers aren't out of session until like 3:34 on a good day, and my story airs at 4 and 5. So I'm like, you know, barely making it on air every day. The
Yeah.
stress levels, and it's so funny because, like my family, my boyfriend, like everybody, like they know what time not to call me during the day, because if you call me like after 3 p.m., I'm like, I can't talk right now. I'm ready, you know, like I'm like such a wreck,
Right.
because I know like I'm heading toward that deadline, and you know, depending on when I got my interviews is how stressed I am. And that plays a toll after a while. Just like it's very, I tell people, you know, finals week, like imagine every day being finals day. Like imagine like just that stress level just being every day. That's what you're doing. And so yeah, it's going to be a big change for me because I'm so used to that. But I'm excited to not have that anymore.
So what? Let's play out a scenario here. So let's say a lawmaker's late to an interview, or get the shot you need. I mean, did you ever not have a story air? Like, what happens if you don't have a story?
Well, I mean, for me, there's been reporters and days where stuff doesn't pan out, but they expect something from you. So you always have to have like a plan B, a plan C. Like you have to have something, and maybe it won't be the full, multiple interviews, me voicing it over, that kind of thing. They call it a package. It might not be the full package, but maybe it's me just going live explaining what happened that day at the state house, or maybe it's just one soundbite from a lawmaker, and then I kind of ad lib the rest based off what I learned that day. So a lot of times I have to change the format if I wasn't ready in time, or I just go to an entirely different story. There's been days where things aren't panning out. It's 2:30 and I have to have something on the air at 4. So I'm like, all right, start from scratch. We gotta get to something else. And those days are always difficult. So when
Right.
you have those 3 story pitches, a lot of times, you might think you're going to do that first one that they assigned you, but then they're like, all right, let's move to your backup, or all right, let's do this. And then other times something breaks, in the middle of the day, and then you're sent to that instead. And then that story, all that work just gets thrown out the window.
Right.
Sometimes you can revisit it the next day or whatever, but it just depends on what your producers want you to do. So it's
And
a,
you're editing your own material yourself that you capture?
Most days, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, it just depends on the story. Like I said, like sometimes if it's a bigger story, they'll give me a photographer, or if it's just a dangerous neighborhood or something,
Hmm.
they'll send me with somebody. I am grateful that Fox 59 and CBS4 have never made me go live by myself. I feel like that's kind of dangerous to shoot your own live shots, especially with what we've seen, like
Uh-huh.
people have like attacked news reporters and things like that. So I think when you're going live, there's a different element there where you need that second person. Um, but I've definitely shot my own, what they call look lives, where I record it and then I look like I'm live, but I'm not really live.
And you've kind of already run through the day-to-day chaos that you deal with this job, but um, as far as the work that you've done and the reel that you've put together, what makes a good storyteller? What needs to be included in stories?
So everybody talks about having the character, that human aspect, someone that you can relate to.
Hmm.
It's all about creating moments. So moments that we see and feel every day. So maybe it makes the viewer kind of chuckle a little bit, or maybe it makes them choke up. And maybe there's got to be something memorable. There's actually a book that I read called Make It Memorable by Bob Dotson. And if anybody is interested in becoming a news reporter or storyteller, that book is a must read, because he kind of explains how, you can write to make people feel something. And when people feel something, they remember,
Hmm.
and they care. And so that's kind of been the challenge for me is I cover the state house and not a lot of people care about politics. Not a lot of people care about some of the things that are going on, but I have to make it to where I convince them that this is important enough that they should care. And, hey, this is why, this is how this will impact you. This is why you might want to call into your legislator,
Hmm.
just kind of showing them. And then I try to find characters that the story impacts. And then they kind of, create those moments that I was talking about. But I'd say that that's what makes a good storyteller, is just somebody that can make you relate, make you feel, and create moments in the story.
One of the drawbacks of this show I've neglected to address is we've mostly had men on talking about their experience of being in media, and I'd love to get a comparison of just your experience as a woman being in this business. What are some things that men are able to get away with that women cannot get away with in the television business?
Oh, where do I begin? um, I would say, I mean, appearance for sure. I mean,
Hmm.
I could not tell you the number of women who have called in, or men who have called in or emailed or messaged me, like just about dumb things, like that shade of lipstick is atrocious, and those earrings are obnoxious, and your hair looks terrible. Why are you wearing that dress? Just things that like shouldn't have anything to do with my job.
Mm-hmm.
just getting attacked. So I feel like that is definitely something that men don't really face. I mean, nobody comments on someone's tie or their jacket color or their, that's very rare for a guy. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's just very
Mm-hmm.
rare for a guy to get attacked in that way. But women, it's all we get. And especially with weight too. Like I feel like men can be a little bit heavier set and not get criticized. But if a woman gains any weight, it's a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. And same with gray hair and things like that. Guys can get away with aging. You'll start to notice that there are a lot more elderly news reporter males than there are females, because after a while I think news directors, they just don't want old ladies on air anymore. They don't want wrinkles,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want great, there's a look that they're after. So it does discriminate in that way, I think, a lot. And I think that's just due to the research that what people want to see on their TV. I think historically they trust, older men, and that's like a look that, like, might seem to be credible, if you will. And then,
Mm-hmm.
for the women, it's sex appeal. It's, oh, she's got too many wrinkles, I don't want to stare at her face. And now there's the high definition cameras,
No kidding.
shows
Yeah.
every little thing that you've got. So I think that's the main one. I would say I definitely think there's a pay gap. um
Mm-hmm.
I've just, from talking to my colleagues and seeing the research and everything done on it, men get paid a lot more in this business than women do. I think more women want to be in this business, and can afford to be in this business, in the sense that their husbands might be. What I've found is a lot of the time, and this is not the case for everyone, believe me. I mean, I'm a prime example of it, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times women can afford to make a little bit less because maybe their husband is the breadwinner, so they can do this because this is their passion.
Mm.
um, and there are some men that also do this because it's their passion, and maybe their wives are the breadwinner. But either way, it's not a very high paying job. And that's a misconception that a lot of people think that it is. Now, if you're a main anchor and you've been here for years and years and years, sure, you can make a lot of money in this business. But starting out, I mean, I made $25,000 in my first TV news job. I was barely able to afford my apartment. I was eating peanut
Mm.
butter sandwiches, like, so a lot of these jobs, it's and then when you start that low, you start accepting, even after years in the business, you start accepting just salaries that are like, at that point you're like, hey, I can actually afford, a 2-bedroom apartment now, like, it's like,
Uh-huh.
so it's weird that something that people think is so glamorous pays so little. And it's also something that requires talent and requires schooling and requires, so you would think that you would get paid for all that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the industry's, and it seems to be getting more common to hire younger people and out of college people. I mean, gosh, it would have been unheard of for me to even be in Indianapolis at this point in age,
Mm-hmm.
you know, 10 or 15 years ago. I was told that it was going to take me at least 3 markets to get here or something like that, and it was my second market.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's getting younger and younger, even in larger markets now, because they can pay you less. You can shoot your own stuff, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, the direction of news is declining, in my opinion, based off the fact that they want us to do so much, and the only thing that will suffer is quality.
Right. Well, and we learned about it in school, but I think part of the problem too, and we could talk about it, the 24-hour news cycle, I think, is going to be the death of democracy, because news has become entertainment and shock value. And you also have like less and less voices in the marketplace. Like, you have these massive corporations. I was going to ask you, has CBS 4 said, hey, don't wear this color? Like, are there limitations within the corporate level that you have to watch with your job?
Like, as in, like, don't wear this color because it's a political color, or what were you meaning?
Like, Eric, one of the reporters that we learned from at UND said he couldn't wear a brown suit. It was just like a corporate thing.
Oh, really?
Obviously you wouldn't wear a green suit because of the green screen, and you're going to be like Anchorman with a floating head, but
There are consultants. So at my last job, not Fox 59, surprisingly, but my
Hmm.
market 189 in Lafayette had consultants, and they told us, how to fix our hair, how to do our makeup, how to dress, how to do everything. You kind of don't own, when you sign these contracts, you don't own yourself anymore. Like, I have to ask for approval before I dye my hair, or I have to ask for approval before I cut my hair, or if I'm gonna get a tattoo, I have to, they own my look essentially.
Mm.
And also, I mean, I also think, coming back to your question about the difference between, men and women in this business, I also think, a lot of times they're like, oh, we're looking for a brunette, or we're looking for a blonde, or we're looking for, I think they
Mm-hmm.
have a certain look that they're looking for, when I don't know necessarily that they're looking for blonde men or blonde or long haired men or whatever. But I think they do want variety in the look of women, and don't care so much about what the men look like, as long as they're credible and they have a good voice or whatever. So
WWE has done that before,
yeah.
where they're like, we have our blonde star, now we need a brunette one. Like it happens. Believe me,
Yeah,
it happens.
it's very weird. And I mean, I guess it kind of helps you in a way when you're job searching, like, oh, I guess they just weren't looking for my look. And you can kind of feel like, I'm talented, okay, but they weren't looking for, a light brown, you know, freckle Irish girl. They weren't looking for her. That's the next station, whatever.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
but yeah, so I don't know. I just, um, it's interesting how they can control you with contracts. I mean, they can control how long you stay there, your non-competes. Non-competes are, don't even get me started, like you sign that contract, and you have to pay out if you break it. It's very frowned upon if you break it, and you can't go anywhere else in the market. So like, for instance, someone who wants to stay here, like I have family here, I have a son, I want to be around my family. If I wanted to go to WTHR or Wish or Six, I have to at least wait a year because of my non-compete. And so I think that's interesting that they can have that hold on people. And it's non-negotiable. Like, it's like, we won't hire you unless you sign this contract. And it's more and more becoming where you can't even write things into your contract. They say this is a standard contract. Everyone signs it. You can't have, because it used to be, people would be like, all right, well, I want this written in, or I want an out if I get this certain market. And sometimes they accommodate that, but then a lot of times they're just like, no, this is what you're getting. Sign it, or take it or leave it. And then you're stuck there like, ugh, am I?
Did you have a manager or an agent at any point?
I did not, which I was. So I was lucky in the sense that I kept a lot of my internship contacts.
Okay.
So I always knew I wanted to end up in Indianapolis. So I interned at Wish, THR, and Fox 59 in college. So I just stayed in touch with all the people that I met throughout. And then when it came time to job search, I literally interviewed at all three of those stations that I interned at. And the one that I liked the most was Fox 59 and CBS 4. The news director there was awesome. I mean, he just like, you just wanted to go to work for this man. He ended up leaving like 3 or 4 months into my job there. I was so heartbroken because he was who I wanted to work for. But hey, it happens. He got a good opportunity and he had to leave. But it's interesting that you can go without an agent, but there are so many people in this business that do have agents, and I hear that they get them more money, they get them a little bit more written in. Like, I think you have a little bit more room to negotiate when you have an agent. But then there are some stations that are like, we don't want to deal with agents, so they might only go after people who are representing themselves. So it varies based on the news director.
Well, and being younger and being in this business, was there ever a sense of jealousy among older staff that, like, you're coming for my job, like, has there been resentment,
older staff jealous of me,
or anybody in your experience?
Oh,
I'm not, and you don't have to name names.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think it exists. I definitely think there's a little bit like, look down on you, like, are you really wearing, like, I got a couple comments like, are you really wearing those heels, like, are you really wearing that dress, like, like, obviously we have different styles because there's the traditional like older lady, like, which I love blazers, like I'll wear a blazer any day, but like, there's just different styles, so they'll make comments like that, or like,
okay.
But for the most part, at least at the station I work at now, they're very like motherly, and I think that's just kind of part of being an anchor anyway. They kind of take you under their wing a lot of the time, which is really nice. Like Fanchon Stinger, she's like the role model for all of which she's not older, but I mean, she's older than me, but she's not old by any means.
Right.
So
Right.
like, but she's taken, kind of like the mother bear role of all these 20 somethings coming into the newsroom. And, so I think, and same with Angela Ganote. I mean, she's really,
Yeah, she's been on
helpful.
the air forever.
Yeah, and
Long
I
time.
mean, she's amazing, and she really cares about her job. And yeah, I just feel like she's a good example of someone who is the same person on and off air. But yeah, I don't think someone like her could be jealous of someone like me, because she's just
Yeah.
accomplished so much. Like, but I don't know. Like, I think I've kind of stayed in my own lane too. Maybe if I were trying to like become like this big bad anchor and like, trying to step on their toes, I think maybe I would have gotten that. But I also just report for the State House. So I've been trying to be very focused on my, role, and none of them are wanting that because it's not really the most glamorous job in the world. I think they might have a tough time having someone like jumping at the bit to take this position when I leave.
Well, I was just thinking about like having a job in the media. You're all excited. You want to try to build something. And then your superior or somebody that works alongside you just makes it a crappy day because
Yeah.
they're not encouraging you. They're upset if you had an idea and it wasn't theirs, that sort of thing. And that happens all the time because it's a like as much as you're a staff, you're also competing amongst each other to stand out,
And
right?
that is the weird dynamic because you're right. I mean, you want to be the lead story that day. You want to be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what I mean when I say I stay in my own lane because of my niche, because of my role. If it's
Right.
a state house story, I get it. There's no one competing for it. Like that's me. So I interview the governor every year. I do that because that's my role. So I don't really have to compete with it. Now, Dan Spieler, he is the guy who runs In Focus, the political show. So if it's like a, vice presidential interview or something really big, he'll get that. But if it has to do with our state lawmakers, for the most part, I sit down with them, or our governor, for the most part, I sit down with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been nice for me because I don't have to compete because I already have that role. But all the other reporters, like general assignment reporters, they are constantly competing for the lead story that day. And I was a general assignment reporter when I first started at Fox 59 and CBS 4, and I definitely felt that pressure of like, no, I want to cover this. Like, no,
Mm-hmm.
send me. Like, and so and then you'd in the morning, if there was a breaking news story that happened overnight, it became a competition for who pitched it the best. So like you would already have these interviews set up and you'd be like, this is the angle I want to take and blah, blah, blah. So then whoever pitched it the best, that's the person who would get that story. So it does become pretty competitive in that aspect. And I remember
Yeah.
some coworkers just kind of fighting amongst themselves, like, okay, like whatever, I still thought mine was better, or whatever, there's like little chatter or whatever. And you can kind of tell that there's a little bit of tension, but because news happens so fast and we're, gosh, I don't even remember what I did 2 days ago because it's all, it kind of runs together. You get over it pretty quickly and you move on to the next thing.
Did you get starstruck anymore? Who are some people that you've interviewed over your time in news?
Ooh, do I get starstruck?
Working in the NFL,
I think this
I
job is
did.
kind of, go ahead. What'd you say?
Working in the NFL, I did.
Yeah.
After a while, but it fades after a
That's
while.
what I was gonna say. I think this is the best medicine to kind of get you over getting starstruck because you start to realize that people are just people, and they're not that big
Right.
of a deal. But yeah, I mean, there's been some people, some lawmakers, like when you're like I like interviewing the vice president was kind of like when you're in those moments where you know White House security is sniffing your bag and you just feel like you're important and you're at this, big moment. You're like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, you get like the little butterflies, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like here we go. Like, it's just things like that. I mean, I still kind of get excited, I guess, about it. And then you don't want to mess it up. I mean, even just as much as I've interviewed the governor, when I have one-on-ones with the governor, I'm excited. I make sure I'm,
Hmm.
prepared and ready to go, because those are rare moments. And one day I'll look back on it and be like, okay, I was interviewing the governor during a, international pandemic. That's pretty cool. And so
Yeah.
um, that's something that I think, I wouldn't say I'm starstruck, but I'm definitely grateful and in the moment, and not taking for granted the fact that not everyone in the state gets to sit down with the leader of our state.
Right.
And it's
Right.
an honor. And you want to do it justice, because you want to ask the questions that the people of Indiana want to know. And you kind of have to be selfless in that moment. Like, what do I need to ask so that people can get the information they need during this crazy, unprecedented?
Yeah, the past couple of years have certainly, the last 2 years is like 10 in
Yeah,
most, periods of time.
exactly. And that's probably a little bit of why I'm at the point that I'm at now. I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
all right, I got it all in. It's been
It's been fun.
83 years, and it's like I've been in this business for like five.
Um, Perfect segue, especially with Mother's Day being this weekend. How has being a mom changed you, Kayla?
Oh gosh, changed me professionally or just like as a person? I mean, I could go on.
Both, both. I'm curious for both.
Yeah. So professionally, I think it actually has made me a better journalist, in the fact that I care more about things that I would say most of our audience cares about. Before I became a parent, just like education was like, wow, whatever, like just like some of the topics that I covered, like I was like, this is so boring. But then when you become a mom, you start to think, well, I want these schools to be good for my kids, and I want this
Hmm.
investment in these teachers and all these things that I just didn't really care about as a 20 something. That like I just cared about things that affected me. I knew that it was important and that we needed to cover it, but I had different questions. I had better questions. I had more empathy for the mothers that I was interviewing. So it led to better questions and pausing and waiting for them to come up with those moments that we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
And so I think it just made me a better journalist overall. I was pitching better stories. I was connecting better with stories. And I think my heart was in it more especially when there were issues that pertained to being a mom that I was reporting on. They actually ended up making my beat before I became the State House reporter. My beat was like family reporting, like, dealing with young kids and things like that, because they knew that I was passionate about that and that I was going to pitch good stories about that. So
Hmm.
I think professionally, it has definitely helped me. Personally, I mean, it is my favorite job. My favorite job used to be a TV news reporter, but now it's being a mom, and that's kind of where I'm at in my crossroads right now, because um, it's hard to be a mom and to be a reporter. The mom I want to be anyway. And so, but yeah, I feel like it has made me more patient for sure. And just realize that my priorities have changed, and I'm not for myself anymore. I have an entire human that I'm responsible for, and that I get to shape, and lead into the world, and hopefully prepare him to be ready for the world. And I
Hmm.
don't want to, do that halfway. I want to give it my all. And that's how I've been with everything in my life. Like I would consider myself a perfectionist in many ways. And so very type A. So the fact that I can't be a perfect mom and be a perfect news reporter bothers me. Like I'm like, I have to choose one or the other. So obviously, my priorities have changed to where he comes first, and that conflicts in many ways with this career field.
What are some of the things with the newfound time that you'll have? Are you looking forward to doing?
Picking him up from daycare, just as simple as that.
Yeah.
My schedule right now is 9:30 to 6:30, and there are like barely any daycares that go that late, and that's generous if I get off at 6:30. Most days, I'm still working on my web story at 7. And that's the thing, is like what people don't understand, and I didn't fully go through this, but I pitch my stories My day depends on other people. I write
Hmm.
my stories, I shoot my story, or I shoot my stories, I write my stories, I edit my stories, I front my stories, and then I put them on the web. So like throughout the day, like that whole process takes so long. So sometimes I'm off work at 7:38. My son's bedtime is 8 o'clock. So
Right.
I'm basically getting home. I'm picking, and not to mention the fact that I've had to lean on my family because I'm a single mom. So my mom and my dad have had to pick him up from daycare when I can't. And so I come to my mom's house and she's got my kid, and he's like already ready for bed, and I just bring him home, and then we put on pajamas, we take a bath and go to bed. And so he's like not, um, I feel like I'm not getting the full time that I need with him. And with a new schedule, I can pick him up. I can spend that time. I can make dinner. I honestly haven't even gotten into like a cooking. Like I don't even really consider myself well versed in the kitchen because I mean I just haven't had time and I don't have energy
Right.
when I get home. Like the last thing I want to do is cook a full meal because I'm exhausted. And I probably interviewed something tragic from that day and I'm in a bad mood now, so I'm ready to grab McDonald's and call it a day. So
Right.
it's
Right.
it's hard. So I'm looking forward to cooking. I'm looking forward to picking him up from childcare. I'm looking forward to getting him into like sports and being present and being able to go to the t-ball games and things like that I just wouldn't have been able to do in this career field.
I look forward to seeing all that play out on Instagram and social media. I know that he's important to you, and I think that's what I'm fighting for with the content that I'm putting out, because I know women want to have their career ambitions at least attempted, if not accomplished, at least attempted, and to have a family as well. What are some things that we would need to implement across the board in society to allow for women to work and have an opportunity for a family later on? Because I think the ambitions of women is changing in this country, and it's a good thing.
I
Yeah.
think flexibility is just absolutely the most important thing, because what I'm realizing is kids don't wait to get sick when it's convenient.
Of course.
They
Yeah.
they and they'll almost do the opposite. They'll wait until it's the most inconvenient time. And
Mhm.
so that's one thing that I think, especially in this industry, people need to understand that you're gonna have a kid that gets sick and you're gonna need to call in. And it might be the day that you're interviewing the vice president. It might be the day that like, and you're gonna have to have people that can back you up in those situations. And so I think having a variety of different people is a good thing in a newsroom, because I think what's helped in my situation is there are people who don't have kids that are young 20 somethings that can fill in when my kid is sick or whatever. And so that's important. And then just like doctor's appointments, for instance, we don't get a lot of time off in my work. That's one thing that I'm really looking forward to. Is when I accepted this new job, they told me I'd get 3 weeks vacation and 3 weeks sick, and I like choked. Like I was
Hey.
like you're just kidding, right? Like that's off the bat, and they're like, yeah, like that's what we start you at. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like the most days I've had off are 5. Like like I don't even know. And then I get guilt. I feel guilty when I even take those days, because I'm like,
Right.
oh my gosh, like, do they have someone to fill in for me? Do they have, and I stress out when I call in sick. Like I feel like everybody hates me. Like, the next day I come in, I'm like, hey, sorry I was sick, and you should never feel like that at work. You should
Uh-huh.
be able to take your paid time off. That's what you were given. And I'm really excited to not feel guilty anymore when I take my time off. And I think that's really what needs to happen in every field for women to be successful. Is we need to be able to take time off if our kids get sick. We need to be able to go and take them to appointments, because my schedule is 9:30 to 6:30. What doctor's office is open
Right.
outside those hours? What doctor's office or what dental office is open? What any kind of errands that I need to run, that schedule just doesn't work because it's during the week, and I couldn't take off days just to do something like that. And if I did, I'd have to take one of my few vacation days. And who wants to do that to go to the dentist? Who wants to go to to the dentist, but then why would you want to take a vacation day to go to the dentist? So.
Well, Kayla, moving forward, what's next for you? Where do you hope to be in the future?
Yeah, so I will be making an announcement soon on where exactly I'm going, but I'm definitely heading into like the PR, public relations world. I feel like it will be very similar in the aspect of, I obviously will be still very involved in what's going on in the world and will be able to converse with media, help media accomplish a similar goal. I feel like I can take what I've learned from this industry and really run with it in the PR world. You'll see there's actually a whole Facebook group that I'm part of called From TV to PR because it's such a common, move. A lot of TV reporters will head into it. And a lot of them have said, just reading some of their comments, the people who have left, they're like, I feel like I just left an abusive relationship. Like I feel like I'm like finally free and able to be myself again. And I wonder if I'm gonna feel that same way. I know I'm gonna miss news in a lot of ways, but just for the reasons that I've given you. I mean, I wake up in the morning and just instant stress just overwhelms me because I know that my day could just go to crap in an instant because it depends on other people. And I'm, coming up with story ideas. And my son, from the moment he wakes up, he just wants his mommy. He just wants, hey, mommy, like, look at me. Like, hey, where's breakfast? Hey, like, I want juice, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming up with story ideas. All right, we're going to turn on Cocoa Melon. I'm a mess. And I can't wait for a routine that allows me to not be in that position anymore. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what's next for me is just concentrating on being a mom, being a present mom, being a less stressed out mom, and just being happier overall, and just learning every aspect of the PR world. And I'm not saying that I'm done with news forever. I mean, there may be a day that I go back, and I think being in PR will still help me if I want to go back to news,
Right.
because I'm still, maintaining those skills. I will, in the role that I'm going to be taking, I will still be shooting and editing and writing and doing all the things that I do now. So I'm not going to lose those skills. But I just think it's going to make me a happier and more well-rounded person. And that makes me just at peace with the decision, even though I've wanted to do this since the fourth grade. Dreams change. And, I don't necessarily know that I wanted to do this forever. I just wanted to see that I can accomplish it. And I did. And now I'm going to see if I can accomplish being a healthy, well-balanced working mom. Because I think one of the exercises we did in college, and I don't know if you ever did this, but we had to write our own eulogy. Did you do this exercise?
No. That's wow.
Made us write our own eulogy, which is very morbid,
Yeah.
by the way. But yeah, like I had to write my own eulogy, and I had to, basically like from the eyes of other people, what would I want them to say about me? And I did that recently just to see like if my priorities were in check. And it was like, man, like, why is my whole identity being a news reporter? Like, it should be more family oriented. It should be more God oriented. It should be more, the things that I know are important to me. I don't know if they're translating to others as much as I want them to. So I'm just excited to work on those priorities and actually have it so that my legacy is what I wanted it to be.
You don't get an argument from me. I mean, being a mom is the most important job in the world. And I think what you're doing, changing your priorities, being self-aware of those changes, it's going to make you a better person down the line. And I'm excited for you to be pursuing that sort of thing. Where can people follow you and keep up with you if they're interested?
Absolutely. So I think I'm going to keep my Twitter handle this. I'll always be reporting, on Twitter.
Right.
Whether I'm reporting on my own life and my son or reporting on the news. So my Twitter handle is @Kayla Reporting. My email is kaylareporting@gmail.com. My Instagram is Kayla Marie Sully. So yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, they can always follow me on social media. And then for some reason, I think I made this mistake when I made my Facebook. Well, my Facebook is Kayla Marie Sullivan. I'm not like weirdly obsessed with my middle name. It's I think I just was like filling it out, and then it asked me my middle name, so I put it in there, and now it's always been there, and I've never
Yeah.
changed it. So Kayla Marie Sullivan on Facebook.
Marie's my mom's name, and it's her
I
first
mean,
name.
I do love it. It's just
Yeah.
funny that like I have that. No, most people don't put their middle name on Facebook.
Well, I'm also a guy that likes his middle name. For folks who want to hear this again, check out jbkonair.com. You can get this podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Google. Until next time, folks, have a great day and a better tomorrow.